What I wanted to do today is to, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge my colleague, Marie-Hélène Deschamps. You're going to be hearing a little bit about what she's been doing here as well. I stole a bunch of slides from her as well, so I felt a little bit obliged to include her as a co-author, as I usually do. We're partners in crime in this initiative. And I wanted to just give you a little bit of history of where we came from, what we're doing now, and where the industry is here in Canada. I think there's probably a lot of parallels to what you're living down in the States, and a few reflections regarding maybe some future opportunities. In particular, I'd like to focus on our work in black soldier flies. We have chosen that model for a number of reasons, mostly because it's been used as an insect. The larvae have been used as a feed component for animals, as well as its ability to upcycle a large range of residues from the agri-food sector, which is our main area of interest. So first of all, I need to clear the air here in terms of understanding who I am. I'm not an entomologist. I've learned an awful lot about entomology over the last 10 years, a fascinating area of study that I've come to appreciate a lot, particularly on the biological side, but also on the functional side as well. So how did we get started in this? So I mentioned that Heather had mentioned a bit of my background. When I came to Quebec City, I started working in an academic research group called the Groupe de Recherche en Recyclage Biologique et Aquaculture. So it's a group that works in biological recycling and aquaculture. So the director at the time, who became my PhD thesis advisor, had established this group for a long time. He was on the retirement side of his career. I was his last PhD student and working largely in fish nutrition. But his program was also involved in wastewater treatment using microalgae, and then using that microalgae to try and feed fish. So there was already an idea of this circular economy aspect that was interesting. I didn't have a particular interest in algae production, but I could appreciate the technology and the cycling of nutrients nonetheless. So I did my PhD with him, ended that in 2001, looking at fish nutrition and sustainable aquafeed development, and have done a little bit of a return to that area of research over the last few years. I joined the faculty in 2003 and really led a program, a large program regarding new aquafeed developments, looking at environmental issues largely. And in freshwater aquaculture in Quebec, phosphorus is the issue. So we were looking at developing low phosphorus feeds. And this is where we came across this idea of insect meals, because they're low in phosphorus, they're highly ecologically relevant. When we dug in a little bit more about this whole sector, we were really intrigued, and we essentially converted my lab from a fish lab into an insect lab. As I mentioned, I've done a bit of a return back to the fish world over the last few years, and the idea is to eventually start incorporating more technologies related to using insect meals. So we've been working about 12 years in this area. We focus on black soldier fly larvae because of its ability to upcycle agri-food waste and its interest in feed applications. So how did we get started in this? Well, when I started as a faculty member, I met a fellow from West Africa who did his master's degree, a very typical master's degree, but he went back to West Africa and wanted to start an agency promoting small-scale extensive aquaculture to reduce food insecurity and poverty in French-speaking countries in West Africa. And we eventually founded a nonprofit organization called Fish for Africa. And in 2013, it was a growing concern there. We were building a research facility, and were contacted by a group in Sterling, who had recently been awarded a large EU project based out of Ghana. And they were looking for folks to help them on the field. They had won an award called Prote-Insect, one of the first, I would say, large projects looking at insect products and upcycling of wastes, feeding of fish. So we worked with them to develop a BSF hatchery. We were also using domestic flies, characterization of the waste streams, residual organics in a number of areas around Accra, and started a pilot bioconversion system. We also did some work to help them turn those larvae into feed, and we did some feeding studies with tilapia in the Lake Volta region. And it was really interesting. I went to visit, and I thought this is really cool for countries of the global south that needed some resources and needed to deal with their waste organics a little bit more reasonably. And I thought, for developing countries, it was an interesting approach. Only to come home and to understand the reality of food waste. At the time, there was a lot of information coming out about the negative aspects of food waste, particularly greenhouse gas emissions from landfilling of food waste. Here you see, I'm sure you've probably seen this already, but if there was a calculation done years ago already showing that if you took all of the food waste and converted that into greenhouse gas equivalents, that would equal the third largest emitter of food waste globally. So it was a huge problem. And coming from the agri-food sector, where the estimates are between 10 and 30% of greenhouse gases coming from agricultural activities, depending on what part of the world you're at. As a scientist, and if you're concerned about greenhouse gases, well, this was a major issue for us in this area of the world as well. Now, Quebec at the time as well, and has always been a leader in environmental issues. And as early as 2012, they wanted to significantly reduce the landfilling of waste organics. They had already in 2015 tried to put a number around that in terms of reusing 60% of the waste organics. They wanted to eliminate landfilling of waste organics as early as 2020. We haven't hit that target yet, but it was a very aggressive target, and good for them for setting a target up. Now, these policies led to major public financing of large projects related to composting and anaerobic fermentation for methane production. And in fact, in Quebec City, they have recently commissioned an anaerobic digestion facility that is almost at full capacity now. They're using a lot of municipal wastewater solids as well as food waste, although that currently is a pretty small component of what's feeding this anaerobic digester. So this this is a major facility. In 2014, it was estimated to cost approximately $125 million. It was built over the COVID era, so those costs skyrocketed to almost double that. And currently, it's estimated that it's generating $2.3 million of revenue on 5.8 million operating costs. And that really led me to reflect on the fact that we're using ecological services of bacteria to convert waste organics into a usable resource. I'm not convinced that it's the best resource, but it's interesting to think that nobody really questions the economics really of these facilities. It's offering a service, and yet for companies that are working in bioconverting waste organics using insects, the bottom line is often criticized over the last few years because they're not achieving profitability. So I think, it leads me to reflect a little bit in terms of how we measure the impacts of insect-related bioconversion of waste organics and, sustainability indicators and what the costs and benefits really are. In any case, that's maybe a point of question and discussion for the end of this project. So, again, if you take a look at the efforts to reduce food waste, and there are many, and I'm obviously a very large proponent of, first of all, reducing food waste rather than downcycling or even upcycling it through different approaches. And if we agree that there's a space for upcycling of insect larvae of food waste, well, how do we harness that ability and bring it into reality on a real level? So if you think about how to develop novel food waste valorization pathways using black soldier flies, and you think of it as a new animal production sector, you understand very quickly that it's very intricate. There's a lot of pitfalls, there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of challenges regarding this. And anybody who's on this call, I don't have to convince them of those details. But for us, we started some research projects, and then we took a step back and said, well, if we're gonna bring this forward, we need to be a little bit more strategic and to move beyond simple research projects. And we're researchers, so that's obviously of interest for us, to be able to hire graduate students and write papers and get grants to do those activities. We wanted to move beyond that and be strategic in terms of establishing a viable foundation for industry development. And for us, that meant, first of all, yes, establishing a viable and competent research and development capacity, and move into networking and promote this idea. But also beyond that, education and training and publicity was very important. As you all know, this sector requires very specialized training, often not found in agricultural curricula. So we need to develop that. And also to allow to promote some political legitimacy, sectorial support in terms of policies and regulations, but beyond that as well. And finally, social acceptance through all of those components. So we set out to establish a black soldier fly colony. It's a relatively modest facility, but we complete the full life cycle that allows our students to have access to all the different stages for their studies. We also established a leadership chair, Marie-Hélène Deschamps, who many of you know is on the right here. She became the chairholder here. We're lucky enough at Laval University to have a specialized program where if you find funding for 5 years in a new and strategic area, the university will create a full-time position for the chairholder during that time and after that time. So we went out and found the funding for this 5 years. That 5 years has recently come to an end, and we're working on renewing that for a second 5-year period. In terms of education and deployment, Marie-Hélène has been very busy deploying a strategy in terms of integrating entomotechnologies and the idea of raising insects to current modules and courses in our existing agri-food courses, developing new courses around insect farming and primary processing of different species, preparation of different educational packages, even for primary and secondary education programs. And here you can see next door we have a food institute and a summer program, and there are modules that are now including edible insects, how to use them, how to demystify them for young kids. And what we found is that children are very open to these ideas, as close as some older folks can be. Kids are very curious and very open to these ideas, and we're very much convinced that we need to engage those youngsters to make sure that when they get larger, there's no real concerns. There's not that yuck factor anymore. We also approach the government here in the province of Quebec. We're lucky in the sense that there's all of the agri-food sectors can establish what's called a consultation table, a table filière, and these organizations are made up of all of the players in across the value chain. So it's not an association, a producer association per se. They are involved in it, but there's other service industries, there's government, there's academic stakeholders, there's even a general public components that can be put into these table filière or consultation tables. So Marie-Hélène has been very active in establishing this consultative table for the edible insect sector. And that's been a great forum and venue to promote the sector through across that value chain. It's financed by the Ministry of Agriculture. They've been a big support for not only research but efforts such as this. And in particular, I think what's important to me is that it allows for strategic planning. Often producer associations, they've got their nose to the grindstone and are dealing with daily problems. They don't have the leisure to be able to take a step back and look for a 5-year plan. And if an industry or a group does not have a strategic plan, it's a little bit like a boat without a rudder. So for me, this is very important, and we're just renewing that strategic plan currently for another 5 years. So that's been a great advantage. There's a number of components of this. There's a number of working groups, including communication. There's one particularly on FRAS, quality assurance, health and welfare, and sustainability, and some other related activities around sectorial development, organization of an annual entomology day that's related to edible insects. We just had it a few weeks ago. Another great success, as well as I mentioned, strategic planning. Also, the participation of and organization of events, both provincial and internationally. Some of you maybe had the chance to participate in the virtual meeting of Insects to Feed the World that we ended up holding in 2020, and then in 2022 had the chance of holding an in-person organization here, and that was a great success. It was a lot of work to do, but completely rewarding. And Quebec is such a fantastic city to visit and host an event like this. And it really was for us not only to host this event per se, but also strategically to allow us to show political types, other academics, promote networking of this idea of edible insects. It was still relatively new to this part of the world. So for us, this was a very strategic effort to promote this idea. We also, a couple days after the event, had at the Grand Marché, which is a public market here, held an event that we named Eating Insects North after the original activity down in Athens, where we had a bunch of chefs. As you know, chefs have the ear of the public more and more. And we have some fantastic restaurants and some great ambassadors for the food world. And here you have Joseph Yoon. Many of you probably know Joseph, who was our culinary ambassador for the events here, with Jean Soulard, who's a very famous chef here with the Chateau Frontenac. Another chef here that's at a Michelin star restaurant here, that they were all very enthusiastic to come in and show the public, and we had tastings of different dishes that Joseph had promoted. We also had producer groups, vendors that were there showing their products and tastings and promoting the industry at large. So it was a fantastic event. We also had the chance of working with a group following the event to do an impact study, and this was a really great calling card for us, because they showed not only the event itself, but also the legacy of the event, and the many impacts of holding that event. So for us, this was a great opportunity to follow up on that. And if you want to take a look at it, it is still online for your interest. Now getting to our work specifically here, if you look here as a quick image of the value chain of black soldier fly larvae-based bioconversion of food waste and its different components, and we really try here to intervene at multiple points along the value chain, and we try to understand by speaking with our industry partners, what keeps them up at night. what are the technical challenges that we can build teams around, and address their challenges to be able to move the industry forward a little bit easier. Um, and we started very simply, like many of our colleagues have, where we were, not only setting up the lab, but trying to understand what kind of food waste and residues were available to us, particularly early on, focusing on fruit, vegetables, and cereal products, pre-consumer, because of the regulations here. I'll be talking a little bit about that a little bit later. But very simple, high level understanding of what the opportunities are, both on in terms of logistics, in terms of residues that are available, understanding how these fly and larvae grow, getting the lab underway properly. Um, and I didn't want to go through a large grocery list of projects that have been recently finished or ongoing, but I wanted to just give you a bit of a flavor of what we worked on, what we have been working on, and what we are working on. So we've done a lot of work on pre-consumer fruits and vegetables, obviously. As a result of the Insects Feed the World project, we had a standardization effort financed through the OECD, and an effort through Laura Gasco's lab, to see how we could develop standardization efforts. And I have to say, a lot of this was built on Jeff's original publications, based on standardization. But we had multiple labs internationally working on same diets to see the variation between diets, and to come up with standard methods, as I said, to help new labs coming in to the area adopt these standard methods. We were looking and still are looking at impacts of primary processing on product quality. How do you kill the insects? How do you process them? What are the food safety issues around that? One of our colleagues, Linda Saucier, is a food microbiologist, and she's been very much involved in our efforts. Understanding food stock and larval microbiome on growth and development. This is a very important area of research across different insect species. And Laurence Auger, who some of you have met, has really did some really interesting work using a xenic larval platform to show the importance of different microbial consortia on growth and development. We've also been doing some fundamental work on growth models, adapting what's called the Gopert's family growth models to black soldier fly larvae, and particularly looking at temperature, trying to standardize using temperature, which is not an easy thing. I come from the fish world, as I said, and we use degree days for incubation of eggs and growth of fish because they are temperature dependent. Now they live in an aquatic environment that the temperature is pretty uniform, and which is not the case in a black soldier fly larval pile. Many of you know that it's difficult to get an average temperature of a growing mass of black soldier fly larvae. So we're trying to understand that a little bit more. We also had a project where we're looking at fisheries waste, shrimp processing waste, feeding to black soldier fly larvae to try and improve their reproduction and growth, and found, in fact, that it did the opposite. And Marie-Hélène's student showed that, in fact, it looks like it's related to calcium levels. So that's a project that we're following up on, and as a fundamental component of understanding nutritional requirements and interactions. That's something that we're working on as well. And finally, anybody who works in agriculture understands the importance of genetic selection. The money is in improved lines of whatever crop or animal species you're working in, but also to be able to improve growth on an industry basis and bioconversion. Genetic selection is very important, and of course, the relatively short generation interval of insects gives us a real opportunity because you can turn these families around in a hurry. Also, the inherent variability of populations gives you a lot of power in terms of genetic selection. We're looking at genomic selection at this point. Have a couple of publications in a new project funded to convert that into family-based animal model selection approach. And then that's in collaboration with our good friends at Entosystem just down the road. I wanted to dig in a little bit into some work we've been doing with frass. I don't have to convince anybody the importance of frass as a quote unquote side stream. As a like compost, it has similar levels of NPK as a fertilizer, but it also has the advantages of a very interesting microbial profile and activity. There's also been a lot of suggestion that chitin and other metabolites might have a beneficial impact on a range of agronomic traits, including plant protection, induction of gene expression important for disease resistance in plants. And we set out a project to determine some qualities of black soldier fly frass as a component of integrated pest management for horticultural applications. We showed some preliminary data showed some interesting antifungal activity of black soldier fly frass. So we wanted to dig into that, and the hypothesis was that this antimicrobial activity and plant protection capacity could be harnessed using black soldier fly frass above and beyond typical compost or other organic amendments. And our approach is really to document and understand in vitro and in vivo capacity to support plant growth. At my lab, we concentrate particularly on antifungal pathways, but we've got an ongoing project looking at gene expression of plant defense pathways in tomato plants and cucumber plants currently underway. So we wanted to really look at black soldier fly frass beyond fertilizer, and I think that really, allows us, within the context of a bioeconomy platform that you folks have and are working on, speaks largely to that idea. And we used a reference Gainesville diet versus an in-house diet that we call our Laval salsa, fruit and vegetable bakery and brewery mix that was based largely on composite samples of grocery store wastes a number of years ago already. We've characterized this diet to a large extent. It supports the growth of the black soldier fly larvae very, very well and serves as a constant control in a lot of our studies. So for this project, we essentially compared frass from Gainesville and frass from this Laval salsa. We pasteurized it or not, both of these studies, and then both of these frass types, excuse me. And then we took extracts of that frass and we did in vitro fungal inhibition studies. We followed that up with including 10% of each of those frass along with a compost and control diet, so untreated control in a typical organic compost that's used in the horticultural industry here. We did mineral analysis. We planted disinfected tomato seeds. We infected them with fusarium, which is a fungal disease, typical problem in a number of tomato cultivars and other greenhouse vegetable cultivars as well. Then we followed those out to look at severity of wilt and also measured what we call the area under the disease progress curve, which is apparently a well-known disease indication criteria, evaluation criteria. I have to say I'm not a horticulturalist either. So we did this in collaboration with some colleagues in the plant department and the horticultural department here at the Laval University. We have some fantastic plant disease folks and folks that are very interested in greenhouse production. So here, what you can see is This is a non-filter. This is first of all the in vitro antifungal activity. So here you can see that essentially of these six fungal pathogens, this is the level of inhibition of in vitro exposure to the different frases. So here you can see the Gainesville before pasteurization and after pasteurization. We pasteurized at 70 degrees for 30 minutes, which is the EU requirements for frass, or used to be. I'm not sure that's still the case. At the time it was. And this is the fruit and vegetable before and after. And essentially what you can see that is that particularly the Gainesville is very potent in inhibiting these six pathogens. And pasteurization for each of those types of frass was very important. So we assume that that's a microbial mediated impact. And indeed, if you looked at the filtered, so we filtered these extracts prior to the exposure to essentially eliminate the bacteria, and we essentially saw no antifungal activity. So it shows that not only are these, not only is this microbial mediated, but there are some heat sensitive bacteria or microorganisms that are involved in this. If you look at the plant growth parameters here, again, negative control, so no fertilization, commercial compost, and the different frass components, either Gainesville or fruit and vegetable, either non-pasteurized or pasteurized. You can see that the frass does support plant growth in terms of fresh tissue weight as well as stem length. This work has all been published. And if you look at as well the disease severity of these different frass components, both Gainesville, fruit and vegetable, and the different controls, you can see that the disease severity is significantly lower, particularly for Gainesville. And what we saw, which was interesting, is that the disease severity seems to be not as much impacted in vivo as it was in vitro. So there may be some components that we're not quite understanding at this point, but nonetheless, you can definitely see that disease severity is significantly reduced using different frasses, irrespective of pasteurization or not, and that Gainesville is a lot more efficacious in terms of treating these diseases. And here, it's maybe a little bit difficult to see, but you certainly do see the impact, the differences between the controls, the fruit and vegetable, and the Gainesville here. Some interesting in vivo data as well. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some of the other work that we're doing in terms of valorization of livestock residues. And we are currently focusing a lot on different components of livestock residues, as well as what I would call decentralized bioconversion, trying to understand what are the opportunity for regionalized, decentralized, smaller scale bioconversion using black soldier flies in regions that don't have access to either large facilities, composting, or anaerobic digestion. And part of this is to take advantage or understand the impacts of transportation, as in the United States. Canada has large distances between small communities. It's not like Europe. It's not like parts of Asia, and we need to understand the impact of transportation. The reality is that a lot of organic residues are 80-90% water, so transporting water really does not make a whole lot of sense. So is there an opportunity to look regionally at these kinds of models to reduce or to improve valorization of organic residues? We have been working with anaerobic digestates. So you could see biomethane facilities as competitors, and they are for waste organics. But our attitude is if you can't beat them, join them. They are having issues around volumes of digestates as well as metabolic activity of digestates. So we have been working with digestates and understanding what the opportunities are to use them as feeds for black soldier flies. Interestingly, we've shown that they have reasonable amounts of protein. Obviously, a lot of the carbohydrates have been fermented or been digested out of those. But we've discovered that if we add a simple amount of fat, waste lipids from the restaurant or other industries, we can approach levels that we normally see on what we would call complete diet. So we think there's a real opportunity there. We've also been working on animal residues, both manure and carcasses. Obviously, there are regulatory issues here, and we understand those. But we want to understand what the breadth of the technology is able to do for these types of residues. We've been working on poultry hatchery residues in Quebec, and one of our PhD students, Marie-Ève Dallaire-Lamontagne, has done a fantastic job. She's going to be defending her PhD thesis soon on poultry hatchery as a model. Lots of challenges there. I've got a project where we're looking at swine carcasses as well. We're coupling it with actually aerobic digestion, short-term aerobic digestion to reduce volumes and stabilize the biomass, and then using that as feed for black soldier fly larvae. We're in the process of putting in an LOI with some colleagues in Norway, Iceland, and the Netherlands to look at fisheries and aquatic waste. And I was interested to see some colleagues in the CIBI consortium that you have there. Delbert Gatlin, a fellow who I know from the literature, I've met him on a number of occasions, who's doing some similar work. So I'd be interested to speak with him about their work. One of the things we're looking at because of the regulatory issues on using black soldier fly larvae is some alternative markets. And we have a project that's been submitted, and we've done some preliminary work using black soldier fly larvae as well as algae biomass to develop sustainable lobster and snow crab baits. And we don't think about this very often, but the amount of bait that's used, so fishery resources that goes into baits for lobster and snow crab is incredible. The amount of money that's spent on that is incredible. And the fish that are coming from fisheries used for those baits are coming under a lot of pressure, both in terms of availability and just political pressure in terms of using those resources to catch, what's essentially a luxury project. So we're looking at developing some alternative baits, and the data so far look pretty compelling. Just very quickly, I wanted to talk to you, give you a little bit of an update. I think it's probably pretty similar in terms of what's going on up here, and maybe take a step back and talk about the industry dynamics. This is some work we did with Cheryl and Jeff in 2023 to take a look at the industry in the United States and Canada. We mapped out a number of producers and processors of insects at that time, and the landscape has changed a lot. Here in Quebec, there's a lot of interest to develop the sector here. You can see the very important growth through the mid-teens, and then essentially a stagnation when some of the, let's say, industry reality hit for a lot of the producers. We currently have a handful of producers from different species working here in Quebec, Entosystem being the major one here, and a very close partner to our work at Laval University. We have a number of processors and, let's say, end users of the products that are left, but a large decrease in that crowd, unfortunately. Worldwide, I think we all understand what's been going on to a large extent. Some spectacular failures through Europe and South Africa. In this case, you all know Intera, who was a partner for on a number of projects here. They seem to be going very well and put in a full-scale facility and had some problems. They also had a bit of an interesting shareholder base that didn't help them out when they hit the wall with some technical problems, unfortunately. You also probably are aware of the issues with Aspire. Aspire was a partner in the chair, and we were interested in trying to help them out. I have a farm not too far from London, in fact, so I did go to visit their facility when it was up and running. It seemed clear that they had some issues, not only around processing, but also around production. Apparently, they are looking at reviving some of their activities. I'm not sure where they're at with that, but it's certainly both of those files left a a bit of a stain on the along with the other failures, left a bit of a stain on the industry in terms of its potential. Some other issues around negative public perception. I think that early on there was a lot of enthusiasm around the insect sector. I can tell you when we were organizing the meeting here, we saw we received some very strange emails from folks that, on a different basis, told us that to be completely frank, we were going to hell because we were trying to force eating insects on people. And there were some far right political groups here that were lobbying the government against that as well. It's a strange time, with social media and misinformation. These types of ideas can circulate quickly and gain a lot of attention. So I think part of our job needs to be on surveying these ideas and trying to push back with science-based realities, which is not always easy. So, this is a typical technology maturity curve. And, we all saw a lot of the increase in interest and funding of large-scale projects. And then when the confidence and delays happened and the lack of productivity happened, we saw a very large and quick decrease in funding. And today, I think we're at maybe a bit of a consolidation stage. And hopefully we're going to be able to take off again based on more rational expectations and business plan. And that's part of our responsibility as well, is to be able to offer those tangible and more realistic results and opportunities for the industry. As I say, Ento System has a full-scale facility. They have a fantastic team. We work a lot with Chris and know the entire team there, and it's really been a pleasure. There's a lot of concern about around profitability, scalability. Chris, we've been working with them to a certain extent on frass. We're going to be working with them more on some feedstock manipulation using some microbial methods, but they're a fantastic partner, and we're always willing to help them and as much as we can. Another group in the Maritime Province, Oberland, I think they've been looking a lot on insects as potential feed components for the aquafeed sector. It's an interesting opportunity for sure, but they are in the process of scaling up. So we are certainly open to working with them. We don't know them as well, but they seem to be moving ahead. So my perspective on this is that the initial enthusiasm and growth has given away to some real realities working within the agri-food sector. I think that a lot of people forgot that, we're producing animals here. So, first of all, there was inefficiencies of small scale production. There was a lot of small producers here, essentially working in their basements or small processing facilities. And, as we say sometimes in the innovation field, if after 3 or 4 years you're not able to scale it up, well, let's call it a hobby and move on. And that's not being pejorative, it's just being reasonable and realistic. So I think a lot of those people did realize when that reality hit them that this wasn't the Klondike that it was apparently called at the beginning. CapEx of large scale projects, obviously, this is difficult to bring into a competitive landscape, given the CapEx as well as production issues and OpEx in terms of feedstock growth bioconversion, and in some species, some disease issues that have come along. Big issue is a evolving regulatory framework, both federal and provincially. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency that approves uh, ingredients for animal feed has evolved in a strange way, I would say. And Chris would have a better idea than do I, but they were very enthusiastic about this and approved Intera's black soldier fly larvae for poultry as well as a couple of aquaculture species. And I've kind of backtracked, unfortunately, and have become very risk adverse. And it's very frustrating, regulatory agencies here, anyways, s- tend to want a zero risk environment. And unfortunately, that rarely exists. So I'm a bit fearful regarding regulatory issues. Also, what I call the commoditization of insect meals, comparison of soy versus other proteins. I'm pretty sure insects will have a difficult time uh, being having their costs and value down to soybean, even with the increase in prices of soy recently. So that is an issue. And finally, political instability and conflicts. I will say that uh, the issues around the free trade agreements between the United States and Canada, the tariff that had been imposed by the current administration down there has caused a lot of heartache and a lot of consternation and aggravation up here, and has caused the government to turn in and move away from, I would say, green technologies for the time being. They're going to take a back seat looking at resources, looking at what we have available currently to support our economy in the short term. And that means that unfortunately, green technologies are going to unfortunately take the back seat for the next little while, in my opinion. Now, there has been some work on developing some new economic tools. I'd mentioned this consultative table for the province, the Table filière des insectes comestibles. And I saw a presentation by a group that was commissioned by them, um, uh, uh, a group that works in the agri-food sector, and they put together a really interesting a calculator that showed the sensitivity of prices and different components on producing insects. And I think it really, to me, brought home the ability to show to people into entrepreneurs in the area to what the realities are. So that's a very interesting component. I put a link in there. Unfortunately, it's only in French. But with AI tools now, maybe it would be easy to translate it if there's an interest for your audience. Also within our group, our student Marie-Ève Dallard de la Montagne has developed an economic tool along with our friends in Switzerland at Sandec, EWAG, to put together an economic forecasting model for both centralized and decentralized production at different levels. So it's an interesting step towards the reality of this environment. So what's the next chapter? Well, our friend Moritz Gold recently put together a list that I thought was interesting and maybe was worthwhile thinking about in terms of economic, agricultural, legal, and climatic context. So developing a generally monetizable products, services, and business models. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Future priorities in terms of circular economy. My concern here is how do you develop indicators and put a value around circular economy and these sustainability indicators? I don't think we're quite there yet. Reducing business waste in terms of lowering input costs. Food chain supply security in terms of traceability and regulation, huge issues, obviously. Naturally improving yields and protecting crops, including the valorization of frass, something that we're continuing to work on here. Demonstrating environmental impacts, and again, that's important through life cycle assessments. But then, how do you put a value around that? So this is a collective challenge, I think, as well. Promoting animal health, of course, both the insect health, but also how can we use insects as functional aspects in animal feed to promote animal health? So what are the indicators that we can prove and promote in terms of feeding these products to animals? Developing sustainable bioproducts. I guess the folks who I'm speaking to, you are convinced of this already, obviously. And of course, training and outreach, not only for labor markets for the industry, but also helping to educate and promote this idea to the general public. So with that, I'd like to thank, first of all, the philanthropic partners of the chair, Marie-Hélène's chair. They've been not everybody is still there, unfortunately, but they were a great group they have been a great group of pioneers and sustainable promoters of the idea. And I can tell you, finding $600,000 from an emerging industry was not easy, but the goodwill and the interest around the table was for me never seen before. So we owe them a great debt of gratitude. And finally, thanks to our team and our sponsors. We have a great group of students and colleagues who are convinced of what we're doing, and we're always up to the challenge. So thanks very much, everybody.